Warning, spoilers for Secret of the Mimic. Five Nights at Freddy's is no stranger to debates. When the FNaF 4 minigames took place, 1983 or 1987, or if William or Mike was Springtrap, and more that I don't care to mention. However, there is one debate that has grown larger than any of these. That debate is, of course, whether or not the Fazbear's Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex books are canon or not. For years, the community has begged Scott Cawthon to answer this debate because, straight up, it was not fun, and it seemed like the answer would never come. But somehow it did. Just yesterday, FNaF's Secret of the Mimic released, and it finally ended the book debate, and somehow everyone lost. Let me explain. First off, let's talk about what Secret of the Mimic has to say about the book debate. Of course, this is about the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, since that's where the Mimic first appeared. Secret of the Mimic confirms without a shadow of a doubt that Tales from the Pizzaplex is not canon to the games. How, you might be asking? Well, I'm so glad you asked. It all comes down to the character of Fiona, the wife of Edwin and the mother of David. Fiona gets quite a bit of screen time in this game. I have a feeling after this game she will become a fan favorite, but that's not important. What is important is the fact that Fiona was alive at the same time as David. This is confirmed multiple times in the game. There's an audio log you can find where Fiona says she's going to meet up with the Fall Fest crew and that she'll get a babysitter for David.
I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew. Just for a few days until the installation is finished.
Fall Fest?
It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong.
That's the 0 point field, of course.
Just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you.
David!
Okay, but this could just be the Mimic mimicking her. Okay, sure, we'll go with that. That doesn't explain the family videos Arnold can find when he enters Edwin's house. These tapes are clearly in a chronological order of David's birthdays, and for the first two tapes, Fiona is alive, and in the third tape, Edwin says she is gone, which implies that she has died.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Oh, this is like the progression of the narrative.
David, Mommy's gone. Not all gone, buddy. In a way, she's here. She's with us. Mommy will always be here, watching over us. You better start opening. There's a lot to open. I gotta get back to work. I miss you.
It's only after this Mimic Fiona shows up. This means for the first 2 years of David's life, Fiona was alive. There's also an audio log that can be found in-game of Edwin talking about how he'll have to tell David Fiona is gone.
Why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here, me and David. Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own?
Oh, so she's dead.
His life is ruined.
He doesn't even sound that messed up about
My
it.
life is ruined.
But if David was just a baby or had just been born, he wouldn't have to tell him this since, he's a baby. There's also a family photo of Edwin, Fiona, and David. It's also implied that Fiona died at Fall Fest. There's that audio log I talked about earlier, but also in the Moon.exe game, there's a statue of two people getting married, and the wife is burnt. This game is obviously symbolizing something to do with the Murrays, so it's likely this couple's Edwin and Fiona. And as we know, Fall Fest has had multiple fires, or at least just one big one. So it's possible Fiona died there, in the fire. And why does that matter? Well, because a huge plotline in the Mimic story from Tales from the Pizzaplex is that Fiona dies during childbirth. Like literally, while David was being born, she bled to death. This is a major contradiction. And you can't just argue it's a little mistake because it's not. Because it's not just like a little thing, right? That's like a pretty big contradiction between the stories. It's not just something that you just easily mess up. But it's not just Fiona. How about the fact Edwin is heavily implied to have died in the 70s, being killed by M2?
Test. Journal entry.
M2?
Too bad the new power test was a failure. Due to a minor detonation, there is damage to my office interior, as well as a small fire. Note to self, portable cleaner that gets rid of smoke damage. Better yet, a Cleanovac attachment.
So this is not Edwin, guys. This is the Mimic.
Help! M2! Respond! Emergency! Call for help!
Oh shit.
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play? Please.
Oh, is Edwin?
I can't move. I can't feel my legs.
Is Edwin dead?
You know, speaking of legs, what do you think? I just finished mine. There are still a few kinks to work out. I'm sorry, M2.
No, so he did break it.
I was always gonna fix you. Please, call for help. M2, respond. Oh, I can't right now, buddy. We can do something fun tomorrow. I promise.
Dude, why is he doing this?
She's not busy. M2.
Is he looking for another David?
The framing of this scene definitely feels like it's showing us that Edwin has died. I mean, it's asking M2 for help, M2 isn't giving it, you know, classic evil robot stuff, really. There's also the fact that this whole game started with, oh, Edwin is missing, and then at the end of the game, you would realize, oh, this is what happened to Edwin. This is why he's missing. He died. This is of course a huge contradiction to the books because Edwin doesn't die in those until the Pizzaplex era. Oh, and if you want to see more of my reaction to this game, make sure to subscribe to my gaming channel, Zetto the Gamer, for when I upload that episode of my Secret of the Mimic playthrough. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to this channel as well? I'm trying to hit 3.5k before the end of the year, and subscribing will be a massive help. But only if you enjoy the video, and if you want to unsubscribe at any time, you can. Finally, Edwin's father is the one who found the company in Secret of the Mimic. But in Tales, Edwin started it after college. All of this, as well as just like everything with MCM, shows us that Tales is definitely not canon. Especially since Sealwell said they were making Secret of the Mimic at the same time the books were coming out, and they were doing a dual medium with the games and books.
How carefully are you putting the books in consideration of Secret of the Mimic? So, you know, Tales of the Pizzaplex had a lot of lore about the Mimic and Edwin. Did you take that for this game?
Yeah, you know, we've actually been talking about making this game for a long time, and we were developing the game kind of while these books are coming out. So yeah, I will say it's interesting. Again, I won't go into like the books and all of that, but it's interesting to work kind of in dual mediums.
I don't think they were lying. I think Steelwool and Scott made a conscious effort to make the game's story as different from the books to show they aren't canon. Or well, vice versa, I think the book's story was made differently from the games. Like seriously, if they're working so closely with the books, and there's this many contradictions, I think that kind of says something. This, of course, poses the question of why Tales was even written, especially since it seems to fit in the games pretty well, but I'll talk about that later. But something else I want to talk about is an idea going around that actually, Tales is still canon, just the Mimic and Storyteller and Tiger Rock by extension aren't, because Secret of the Mimic retconned them. I doubt this. First of all, from what I can tell, people get this idea from the Star Wars universe. In that franchise, after the Disney buyout, almost every book was considered canon, but if the TV shows or movies changed something, or retell events from those books, then that's what really happened. Basically, they're a secondary tier of canon. There's this great video from the channel Sheeves Talks that goes over this in more detail. And this would be fair to consider if it wasn't for the fact that Star Wars is not Five Nights at Freddy's. We really have no reason to think this is how it works in the FNaF franchise, not to mention every Tales story was canon to each other. So if 3 of them aren't canon, there's really no reason to think the rest are, outside of trying to hold on to a now debunked theory. Now personally, I actually did believe the whole secondary tier of canon idea for a while, but only because I didn't think the games would change things so drastically. I thought it just changed like little details like designs, you know, that's what I was talking about, not like Fiona's entire story, not like the origins of Edwin's company, and not like Edwin's fates, you know? So yeah, Tales isn't canon, by extension neither is Fazbear Frights, since they are both connected via the story Frailty, which seems to tie Fazbear's Frights and Tales together, with the main protagonist seemingly being a victim of Eleanor's. Also, if Tales isn't canon, why would Frights be, like, logically? This makes sense when we consider the story Prankster. In this story, the phrases stingers moot and even more frights are said, and the Ultimate Guide calls these out as meta clues. And it seems to be saying that the stingers, most likely the Stitch Race stingers, are moot or unimportant, and then even more frights is most likely referring to Tales, since that's just basically Fazbear's Frights, but at the Pizzaplex. Could these clues basically mean the stingers are moot, and there's even more frights coming, and those are moot too? I don't know, it's 5 AM, I haven't slept in 24 hours, I'm just throwing the idea out there. And also, after thinking about it more, the idea of the Stitch line, the theory that only the stories mentioned to and connected to the epilogues of Fazbear Frights are canon, was kinda unfounded. Sure, Scott said that some stories are connected to the games, but this could just mean that they are connected in that they explore concepts from the games. Like Coming Home was connected to the games because it focuses on Susie, a character from the games. So there's really no reason to think that the Fazbear's Fright stories aren't canon to each other. And if that's the case, then Frights can't be canon because what we found literally exists. This story is a retelling or adaptation of FNaF 3, but it's so different that there's just no way it can be canon. It's 2 nights, the layout of Fazbear's Fright is different, hell, the name is different, in the story it's called Fazbear's Frights with an S, and the building doesn't burn down in the end. Anyways, it seems like Fazbear's Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex aren't canon. You might be wondering why Scott wrote Tales then if they aren't canon. Well, I don't know. My main guess is the obvious, money, keeping the franchise relevant, for fun, and Tales still helps us solve things from the games, but I'll talk about that later. I'm guessing Scott wrote Tales mainly because he just enjoys writing these stories, or well, making outlines and then making someone else write them. So he kept doing it. He probably thought the community would assume they aren't canon, since at the time the majority of the community thought Frights wasn't canon. I can't say for sure, of course, this is just speculation. So then we won, right? We finally got an answer to the book debate, a debate that has been going on for longer than half of the franchise's lifespan. Well, yes and no, because here's the thing. Tales and Frights not being canon opens up a lot of questions that I will try to answer today. Let's start with a pretty major one. What about the Into the Pit game? Is it canon? Is it not? Well, I'm not really sure. I'm guessing it isn't canon though, since it was originally just supposed to be a novelty game on like the NES or something, and just became bigger over time. And this game's lore is a mess. It's filled with random Easter eggs, and also not random Easter eggs, and Scott was seemingly kind of uninvolved in the development, since he said Megacat kind of went into the hole for a while before updating him. Seems like it wasn't really a focus for him.
And how has it been working on the game based on a Fazbear Fright story?
It's definitely been a unique experience. I first started talking to Meg. I mean, it's been years and years since that game has been in development, and originally it was just supposed to be a little novelty one-off, like, oh yeah, here's this little company that makes 16-bit cartridges, and that was immediately appealing to me because I'm all about the Super Nintendo, and so if I could make something that would come on the Super Nintendo cartridge, sign me up. That was the most exciting thing, the most exciting product I'd ever worked on. It was still just supposed to be a novelty, but as the development went on, everybody was looking at it thinking, this looks pretty good. This actually looks really good, and so they just kept on going with it. They could have stopped a lot sooner, and they could have stopped with just a little simple novelty game, but they just kept going, and I kept looking at thinking, yeah, keep going, and they kept going, and I would keep looking at it, and it just turned into this big, full-fledged, full-sized game. So we obviously decided to venture away from strictly the cartridges, so that everybody can be able to play it on Steam and everything.
And how has it been working with Megacat Studios then?
Oh, it's been great. It's been really great. I really haven't had to give them. I mean, I have had to give them direction, but for the most part, it's been weird. They would go into the hole for 6, 7, 8 months at a time, and I wouldn't hear anything from them, to the point where I thought, is this okay? And I would even, I talk to the other people that I work with, like, is this game okay? Is this going to be okay? Are they okay? Do I need to check on this? Do we need to check on them over there? But then I would get an update, and it would just be all this crazy new stuff and all this crazy detail, this fluid animation. It's just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And then they'd go back into the hole again for 5, 6, 7 months. And then we just repeat that cycle. But now here we are finally at the end of that road, and I think it's just turned out really great. Like I said, really unique, and I think everybody's going to really like it.
This should be obvious when we consider that Vanny was almost in the game, which doesn't make sense for obvious reasons. Some might say that it's been said the Into the Pit game's Easter eggs had to be approved by old Scott to make sure they didn't go against the lore, so it must be canon.
Make it hours and hours of interactable stuff where you can read and all that. And the problem was, as well, you didn't want to put in enough that it either spoiled too much or like it became contrary to the actual lore and all that. But yeah.
And that is true, but that doesn't necessarily mean the lore of the FNaF franchise, just the lore of the Into the Pit game. Everything has to make sense in the context of that story. Like, let's talk about the Vanny stuff again. That has to have been removed because not only does Vanessa being alive at the time of the MCI not make sense for the overall FNaF lore, it doesn't make sense for the lore of the Into the Pit game itself. Okay, so the Into the Pit game may not be canon, but what about Return to the Pit? Actually, what about the interactive novels in general? Well, I think The Week Before is definitely canon. It says it's a prequel right on the back, and if one book is canon, by that logic, all of them should be, right? Especially since Return to the Pit seems to try to be more accurate to the games with 5 MCI kids instead of 6. So yes, I am arguing that Return to the Pit is more canon than the actual game. Alright, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. What do we use Frights and Tales Tales for now. Because here's the thing, yes, they aren't canon, that seems undeniable, but what is also undeniable is that they are still important to solving the lore. Scott said this about Frights, saying that they fill in gaps from the past, and Tales was most likely written to clear up the story after Security Breach. Even though they aren't canon, that is still clearly the intent. I mean, there's literally a story that basically says, hey, here's what was going on in those experiments in Sister Location, and here's who Patient 46 is. I also think Scott used Tales to introduce the Murrays, since they would be relevant in the next mainline game, and Security Breach didn't set them up, like, at all. This is most likely why Tales still has story beats from Secret of the Mimic, but they're changed. For example, like Fiona's death, the storyteller is kind of in Secret of the Mimic, although it's not called the storyteller.
If writers have you blocked, use an MCM story template. Simply supply the stage manager with the desired character names, location, and genre. It writes itself. Additional
That's like the
story
storyteller.
templates available for purchase. What about the talent? Well, we removed the talent. No difficult puppeteers, demanding actors, or moody directors needed. Our system is drama-free.
And more. So at the end of the day, the books are still important, but how? Well, I think I know, and this is where we get into why I said everybody loses at the start. One of the most infamous characters in Fazbear Frights is that of Andrew. He takes up the role of the Vengeful Spirit from UCN in the Fazbear Frights books. In UCN, the Vengeful Spirit is often assumed to be Cassidy, Golden Freddy. I'm sure with the Fazbear Frights books being confirmed not canon, most people will assume that Cassidy being the Vengeful Spirit is also confirmed, which is fair, but I disagree. Even though Fazbear's Frights isn't canon, I still think Andrew is the one. Wait, please don't click off, hear me out first. My logic is pretty simple, really. It all comes down to Edwin, David, and Fiona, and I guess the Mimic too. Their stories and tales are completely different from how they are in the games, and yet they are the same characters. I think this carries over with Andrew as well. You could argue that it's different, that there's no proof Andrew exists in the games, but I have to disagree. In Toy Chica: The High School Years, Toy Chica, who represents William Afton, kills 6 people in the show, which is likely the 5 MCI kids and Charlie. But there's a secret 7th victim, but it's always been 6. This implies the existence of a secret victim. And no, it's not Elizabeth or the crying child, since the victims are people Toy Chica actively stalks and kills. William did not stalk crying child or Elizabeth. Hell, he didn't even kill the crying child. So that implies the existence of a secret victim. There's also the fact that the one you should not have killed has male pronouns, while Cassidy is a girl in the novels, and a character's gender has never changed between continuities, so she is likely still a girl in the games. The main thing to me is all the stuff I talked about earlier with Edwin, though. Him still existing in the games despite having a totally different story leads me to believe that Andrew is probably still canon as the Vengeful Spirit, and I believe Hudson Foster, from what we found, is probably the FNaF 3 guard for similar reasons. Sure, the story of what we found is very different from FNaF 4, but Hudson still has the role of the FNaF 3 guard, like how Edwin still has the role of being the creator of the Mimic. Now, I don't really like the Andrew thing, since that means UCN doesn't really have an ending and goes on forever. Say what you will about Frights, but at least UCN ends there. Maybe not very well, but it does. But notice how I said that Andrew and Hudson are probably canon. That's because I can't say for sure, because, well, we have no way of knowing. It's totally possible that Edwin and his family are a unique case and they're canon while Andrew isn't. Especially since, let's be honest, so much in UCN seems to be pointing towards Golden Freddy as the one. And this is why I said, ultimately, everyone lost when Secret of the Mimic confirmed the book debate. Sure, the debate is over, but now we don't know what to do with the books. We don't know how to use them, what level of importance they hold. And that's kind of ironic in a way that everyone lost in this huge debate. So please, let me know in the comments what you think. I'm genuinely curious, since I feel like now one debate has ended, another will soon begin. And also, I want to talk about the idea of FrightsReboot and TalesReboot real quick. From what I can tell, it's the idea that the Mega Cat games and Steel Wool games are rebooting Frights and Tales to make them work in the game timeline. And I disagree. First of all, I don't even think the Into the Pit game is canon, and Secret of the Mimic is so different from Tales, I don't think it was ever intended to be a reboot of the story in my opinion. I think what happened is that Tales was maybe Scott setting up the Mimic's origin, or just a fun AU, or like they're just taking elements from the books, I don't know. But I'm just gonna have to say I don't think the reboot theories are correct. I just think Tales and Frights just aren't canon, and were never canon. The final thing I want to talk about is this note that has been found in Secret of the Mimic. It's written by Fiona, and here's what it says. Memory error. Detail report. We were expecting. There were complications. Consciousness was lost for an undetermined time. Once I woke, we were all together and happy. A family. But something was wrong. I felt wrong somehow. Was I me? I would never sleep again. Corrupted file suspected. Please advise. So this note was most likely written by Fiona, or like F10, whatever the fuck. And it says that they were expecting and there were complications. This sounds like a pregnancy gone wrong. And since she says consciousness was lost for an amount of time, and she's writing this as M1. Or well, technically we don't know if Fiona's possessing M1. It could just be the mimic mimicking her, but it doesn't matter either way since it would still think it is Fiona. Since she is the robot and she says she felt like something was wrong, it seems like she's implying she died at childbirth, right? But this game straight up debunks that. So what's going on here? Well, the idea going around is something called TalesDreams. Basically, the mimic's story was a dream Fiona had when she died, or that the mimic had sometime. She dreamed that she died at childbirth, but woke up and everyone was together again, but now she's a robot. Oh no, she'll never sleep again. Do I think this is canon? No, probably not. I think it might just be a reference to Tales, but I doubt she dreamed the story or anything. It's possible though, I guess. So to basically summarize, Tales and Frights are not canon, but they fill in blanks from the games and are important for understanding the story. They show us who Patient 46 is, they explain the FNaF 4 experiments, they tell us the FNaF 3 guard is a random person, and they show us that Andrew's the vengeful spirit. This is maybe the worst possible outcome, since the concepts are canon, but the books aren't, so you have to read these non-canon books just to pick up on the few concepts they explain. Let me know what you guys think now that this horrible debate is over. I'm disappointed I was wrong since I did think they were canon, and honestly I feel like I'm so surprised Tales isn't in particular, because like FNaF vs. Frights, I get that if you think like they're not canon, before all this, right? But Tales, I just felt like it was so obviously like intended to be canon, but obviously I was wrong, and people have been calling out inconsistencies for years. You know, I just thought they were mistakes, but I guess they weren't, so yeah. I think I'm mostly disappointed Scott kept this debate going on so long though, since he does know about it. He's even joked about it before. Like, he made people, not me, get attached to these versions of the characters for years, only to basically say, hey, that's not true. Like, Edwin in Secret of the Mimic is basically a completely different guy. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.